and give this old tree, approximately 180 to 200 years old, a new lease on life. The stump is now approximately 20 feet tall and will become a carved signpost reflecting the rich ecological diversity found within the Arboretum. Such things as maple, oak leaves, swans, chickadees, herons, butterflies, milkweed will be depicted. Here's an example of a carving found on a York Region building on Highway 48 north of Ballantrae. However, this carving is much smaller than ours will be. We have chosen a carver who is the only person able to work or willing to work on stumps taller than 10 feet. Here's an example of some of his other work. The Arboretum will pay half from our own funds, and the other half will come from Parks funds allocated to the Arboretum for signage. I hope you are as excited about this project as we are. It will become a wonderful addition to the Arboretum and to the town of Aurora. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Nancy. Greatly appreciate you coming out and all the work you guys do at the Arboretum. I'll take a motion first to receive the delegation, moved by Councillor Marcus, seconded by Councillor Thompson. Any comments or questions? I will work in this order. So, Councillor Marcus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nancy, thank you for coming. It sounds like an exciting project. I'm just wondering, is there an actual rendition maybe that you possibly have of what it will look like?
No, and unfortunately the carver doesn't do that because he won't really know until he starts working. He has to remove all of the bark from the tree first, then take a look at where the knots are located and other things within the tree before he actually starts work. So it sort of flows, if you wish, as he's working on it.
Okay, great. I'm looking forward to seeing the finished product. Thank you.
Councillor Gartner. Thompson.
Thank you very much, Nancy. Again, I echo the comments that it looks like a great project. Just curious about the timelines.
Mr. Downey will probably be signing off on the contract tomorrow, and the carver will probably start later this fall.
And so are you looking for council's approval, or are you just keeping us
We're
up to date?
just letting you know that this is exactly what's happening. Thought you might be interested.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Councillor Abel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much. Councillor Gardner and I attended the Tree Appreciation Tour, yeah. And I want to thank you. It was very interesting. I had to leave a bit early, but there's a real passion for the trees, and I think we all share that. Mm-hmm. The stump is huge. I just can't believe when you get closer how big it is. So. And seeing that quality of work, it should be spectacular. I can appreciate the artist has to kind of look at it to see how he's going to carve it. So we do have public art. I remember in the first term, I think in 2011, I think I was telling Councillor Gartner, we allocated funds for public art. And I think it's something to the tune of $100,000 a year. And to date, we have not done one piece of art. So this will be the first I've seen undertaken in our community in 6 years. So I'm quite excited about that. I hope that sort of is a catalyst to see some other works of art. It was mentioned on the Tom Taylor Trail. They have several pieces of work of art with the stumps. I think it's a great idea what we could do with maybe fallen ash trees that have succumbed to the emerald ash borer around town. I know there's quite a few coming down, but we don't save the stumps or we have anything for that. So I think that might be something we can do as well going forward. So thanks very much. It's great work that you guys do.
Thank you, John.
Councillor.
Thank you so much for coming, and I echo Councillor Abel. It's a huge stump. I don't even know if one could call it a stump, but is your husband holding something up perhaps that we need to see?
He's our chair Irene is on vacation, as you may know. He's taping this so we can show her.
Fantastic. Thank you.
All those in favor of receiving delegation? That's carried. Thank you.
Thank
We'll
you.
now move on to, thank you, Nancy. We'll now move on to, I don't believe there are any presentations by advisory committee chairs. So consideration of items requiring separate discussion. I'll poll the audience. Is there anyone here for any specific item? Seeing no item in particular? Perfect. So we will start with item number 1 then. Do I have a mover for the staff recommendation? Councilors Marakis and Gartner. Councilor Gartner, I think you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm looking at page 2, and at the bottom, we're talking about licenses that allow staff to work directly from home. I'm sorry, whose report is this? Who would be taking this? Okay. So, actually, the comment for I'm mixed up. The comment for page 2 is, this expires September 30th, so we're once again doing a just-in-time. Is there a reason for that?
Ms. Van Leeuwen?
I mean, we're cutting it pretty close.
Through you, Mr. Chair. I'm not certain the reason that it is coming in a delayed manner. I would have to follow up with staff to find out why it's here at this point in time,
Thank you,
and
and
not earlier.
Actually, maybe it could have been rhetorical. It's just a comment. We're cutting it pretty close to the wire. We do that far too often. Thank you. And on page 3, what I was trying to say before, talking about the enterprise agreement, one of the advantages would be that staff can acquire software to use at home. And I just wanted to know, do we have a policy about staff working from home?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, we do have a policy for remote access.
For remote access, thank you. And the last question, page 4. Every September, a reconciliation process occurs when additional licenses that are used are counted and paid for. So does that mean that we have a budget, we stay within the budget, and then we go outside of the budget for the reconciliation? Or do we account for potential reconciliations in our budget to begin with?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the reconciliation process is accounted for in the budget. So there is the unit-based price, but throughout the year, we acquire additional licenses as required to perform our day-to-day business. And in September, there is a true-up of the additional licenses, but it is within budget.
Thank you. And we follow up, and we only can go up to a certain amount.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any contrary minded? That is carried. Item number 2 is the OSPCA contract renewal. I'll take a motion for the staff recommendation, please. Councillor Marakis, Councillor Tom. Councillor Marakis?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Ms. Van Leeuwen. Ms. Van Leeuwen, I had a resident, and if you could maybe speak to how the proper procedure and policy works in regards to this. We had a resident that there was a raccoon that was out during the middle of the day on the weekend, and they put a call into the OSPCA, and they were told that they don't come after hours. And so they were a bit concerned, considering there was a lot of children around, and so they had some concerns about the children going to pet the raccoon and everything, and the raccoon was going up to the children. So I'm just wondering maybe if you can just speak to the policy and how what entails in that, and so that way residents are aware of how we deal with those circumstances.
Tasha?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I am familiar with that incident. In our contract doesn't cover responding to wildlife. However, in this instance, because it was a safety issue, we are having discussions with the OSPCA to two things, develop some process around where there's a concern for public safety, as well as the messaging, the key messaging that was given to the residents is of a concern. So we have meetings set up with the OSPCA to work through these issues.
And that's great, and thank you for that. And I look forward to when this gets to us at the budget process. So thank you.
Councillor Thompson?
Thank you. Through you to Mrs. Van Leeuwen. Ms. Van Leeuwen, for as long as I've been on council, we've dealt with the contract renewals, but typically whenever they've come before us, it has been that one-year renewal with always that caveat that we're considered to look at N6 options and hopefully try and find some solution that works for a number of municipalities to reduce everyone's costs. And I see a similar, wording in this report. And so I guess, perhaps you can help me understand why we continue to have a barrier or challenge with creating that, I guess, broader contract that encompasses the N6, because each year I always felt that we're only doing 1 year with the hope that next year it's going to happen.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we did go out to RFP, I want to say 2011, 2012. We entered into a 3-year agreement with the OSPCA. Last year, we did do a 1-year renewal, and that was at the onset of this striking this committee, which Georgina is leading, this N6 Animal Control and Shelter Service Committee. Georgina is leading this process, this study, and they have reported recently to the CAOs with an overview of the status of the study, but they're not in a position at this point in time to make recommendations, and therefore, because our contract is expiring December, I wanted to come forward at this point, so we're not leaving it to the last minute, to request an extension to the OSPCA contract for a year to allow us to continue to participate on the N6.
Thank you again. Through you to Ms. Van Leeuwen. So do you feel hopeful that this time next year there might be a more range of alternatives for council to look at?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Councillor Kim?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Ms. Van Leeuwen. Recently, we had the big, what do you call it, the big push, or the ride-by or drive-by alcohol testing for pets or something like that. What do we call it? Last 2 months we had that, what do you call that?
Councillor Kim, to my knowledge, I don't think pets are supposed to be drinking and driving.
No. I'm trying to recall the word, the program. We had extra bylaw officers on duty in support of our OSPCA officer because we had a lot of complaints about dogs off their leash and so forth. And we had, I think, for July, August, and maybe September, we had that push to, what's that program called?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe you're speaking to the augmented service that bylaw has been providing with respect to animal control. So we've took on a number of initiatives this year, including an education event, which was Paws in the Park. We've increased patrols on our trail systems. We've installed some additional signage on our trail systems, and our officers have been actively patrolling the parks. I don't know that we've named it or branded it yet.
And thank you, Ms. Van Leeuwen. So through you, Mr. Chair, how many, I think it's 25 tickets, how many dog owners attended the education event?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it was unfortunate the day of the event, it rained significantly. I did attend the event. When I was there, there was perhaps 25 pets and pet owners, but, you know, they were coming and going. So the exact number I'm uncertain of.
And lastly, so you're asking for additional budget of 45,000 to for the augmented, for the continuous augmented patrolling. Approximately how many hours would 45,000 give us?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe it's 24 hours a week, patrol hours. We currently, in our agreement, the OSPCA provides 40 hours of patrol a week. So it's, you know, partially the patrol and enforcement as well as the shelter services is the total amount. And this extra $45,000 will provide us 24 hours of additional patrol per week.
Okay, and that would be from OSPCA, not from our own bylaw officers.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gartner?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair, to Ms. Van Leeuwen. On page 3, there's a fourth paragraph down talking about overtime policy. And it says that we've pretty much reached the amount of overtime, and we still have allowed, and we still have October, November, December left. So how are we going to pay for that? How are we going to handle that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is in reference to our town bylaw officers reaching their capped limit on overtime.
So follow up, so will they just stop providing the service, or what will we do?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we will have to manage with the resources that we have.
Thank you. I just like to say, as a bit of background, many councils have tried to figure this problem out, and in early 2004, we had a problem where the service provider was not providing proper service, and we went to the SPCA, and at that time, all kinds of alternatives were explored. It's a very difficult subject, and it's especially difficult because if we do a joint project with several municipalities, where are we going to put the facility? And everybody wants it close to their home. So I don't envy you the process, and I look forward to hearing what you come up with.
Councillor Abel?
Thank you, and through you, I think I ask the same questions every year. The 40 hours that we currently have, how many tickets does the SPCA issue? We've got what our bylaws do, which is significant.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't have that number with me tonight, but I can certainly find out how many tickets they've issued, how many charges they've laid, and there are other statistics that they do report on. I just don't have it with me tonight, but I can certainly provide that to you.
They provide a follow-up investigation on any bites or any incidents, and so I'm just sort of wondering, while you're doing those that research for those stats, if you could bring sort of an idea so we can let the public know at council next week sort of what they do provide for the 40 hours. Now, 40 hours, do they work weekends? Do they work evenings? How does that work?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we do have shifts that are off hours, so they do work some weekends, they work some evenings, they set the schedule and they provide it to us, and that is one of the things that we did negotiate in the agreement, so that it's not just Monday to Friday, 8:30 to 4:30. We know that's not when pet owners are out and about with their dogs. And
while we're talking about the shelter service, that's key and very difficult, and I think Councillor Gardner was speaking to it. It's expensive. It's hard to get the right service provided, which is a humane service. Handling animals in a shelter, we have to be confident that they are being treated properly. And we often hear in other areas where that's not the case. The shelter service that we have with the OSPCA, we share with the N6. Is it one location with, or do we have one designated just for Aurora?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the facility, the OSPC facility, is located on Woodbine near Davis Drive, I want to say, Highway 9, somewhere in Newmarket. And currently, Richmond Hill, Markham, and Aurora have contracts with the OSPCA. The other northern 5 municipalities are using the Georgina shelter, and hence the reason why Georgina is leading the animal control study to determine how to move forward with perhaps some capacity upgrades to their shelter and things like that. The OSPCA shelter facility is quite nice. I do attend the facility twice a year, do an inspection with our manager of bylaw services, and they do have very good protocols in place in terms of infection control. They have vets on staff. They have a good adoption process and policy where they mix and match pets with potential owners. So it's quite a nice facility.
That's great, and I appreciate that, because on the surface, it seems like a lot of money. But then when I put it into context, that if we were to build a facility on property and then staff it and pay the maintenance, that would be a lot higher. And then we would have to be assured that we have the best trained. So the idea that we're sharing it, the other comment I would make is that there are a lot of pet owners in Aurora. I mean, I think I've heard people say they've never seen so many pets per capita except here in Aurora. So if we blend that over the household, I think it's what we want. We're serving the residents well by doing so. So my views of have softened quite a bit over the years as I've been on council. Thank you.
Councillor Gardner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. These tickets, the 25 tickets to dog owners with dogs off leash, that is one of the big problems. I believe we were going to put signage up in our trail system so that hopefully we could prevent some problems. Where are we with that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the signs have been installed, to my knowledge. I'm not certain about all trails, but there was a specific trail that we were, and I can't remember the trail's name at this point in time, but a specific trail that was earmarked for additional signage when we had a gentleman who delegated last year at council. So we have done that. We have also increased patrols, and actually our bylaw officers are patrolling the trails on a bicycle so that we're actively in the trails.
Right, but I'm assuming we're not doing that at night. So,
Through you, no, that would be unsafe, trail riding at night.
And do we know, as a result of the signage, if there's been any improvement in dog owners who have their dogs off leash? Mr. Chair, through you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think there has been improvement. I certainly believe that if the officers are visible on the trails, which they have been, that dog owners would tend to be compliant. But I don't know that we have any hard statistics on that.
Thank you very much. And I would just like to say, following on Councillor Abel's comments, my children run the SPCA in Fort McMurray, and it is such difficult work, expensive, requires so much attention to detail because they don't want to have, of course, any outbreaks of any diseases. And it's just incredible what goes into it. And from what I know, our SPCA has done a good job. So maybe we don't rock the boat.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. Seeing no other comments or questions, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. We're now on to item number 4. Could I please get a motion for the staff recommendation? Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Moore. We'll go with Councillor Kim. There's just more people on this side, so it's easier to see everyone. Councillor Thompson?
Thank you. Through to Mr. Ramuno. Mr. Ramuno, one of the comments in the report pertains to the addition of an interchange at St. John's and 404. I know the town's forwarded that comment to the region, but is there any, I guess, update on the uptake of that suggestion? Is it still being proposed outside of that sort of 10-year plan, or is the region given it serious consideration given the continual logjam that we see at Wellington?
We'll go with Mr. They're both reaching for their microphones. I think I'll go with Mr. Ramuno on this one.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we have made a comment. I mean, it's Ilmar's report, but we continue to have discussions with the region. My understanding, it's still outside their 10-year construction plan, but we continue to stress the importance of trying to advance that interchange sooner rather than later.
And Mr. Stevanauskas, anything to add to that?
I concur.
Okay. Anything else, Michael? No? Councilor Marcus?
Other than the suggestion that I'd continue to like us to push for it sooner rather than later, because the problem's now, not 15 years out.
Of course. Councilor Marcus?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Simonauskas. Mr. Simonauskas, it mentions also in there about the left turn restrictions, and now that we've come to realize that the region has deferred the item due to the fact that our rep was not present at the time, I'm just curious to how that has changed our time frame with this project when it's presented at the next committee of the whole at the region. Even if it is approved, I do recall that the representative from York Region mentioned that they prefer not to do it during the holidays. So is that going to affect this?
Mr. Simonauskas?
Certainly through you, Mr. Chair, there's a couple of elements here. So Regional Council will have the report in front of them for October. Then I would like to bring a report back to this council summarizing the results of the open house as well as the regional position, and that would be in November. And from that perspective, we would then look at starting something March or April when they can actually do a 3-month period when they can have stable traffic flow so they can actually get some accurate readings.
Maybe I'll save my comments for next week, but just quickly, I'm just curious also, maybe our CAO could answer this, or maybe Mr. Simonauskas, I'm not sure which one. I'm just curious why it would be coming back to us considering we approved it, pending the region's approval.
Doug?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I might also ask Mr. Simonauskas to add to this, but my understanding would be that since we've had a public forum that this council asked for, that we'd at least have to bring those results back to council before proceeding. So unless there's another...
And I appreciate that, but through you, would we not require a reconsideration, considering it passed on approval pending the regional's approval? So if we were to reconsider it, that would be a reconsideration, would it not? And we would have to ask for that vote.
Are we reconsidering anything? Doug?
See, Mr. Chair, I have to look at the flow. I don't know the flow offhand of when those decisions were made, but it just seems that council would want some feedback from the public consultations, which would have to come as a form of report to council. So, but other than that, that might be just reporting on the results and not suggesting another recommendation. Either way, it might be for council to do that from the floor, would be my...
And Mr. Simonauskas, did you want to add anything?
Through you, Mr. Chair, just to confirm the CEO's position, that's exactly it. It's an information report, just so council understands the feedback that we received through the public process.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So then, I just want to get something straight then. So if, through you, Mr. Chair, if this was approved September 8th, and it was supposed to commence in October, when would have this all happened, considering the timelines that were presented to us?
Mr. Simonauskas?
Certainly through you, Mr. Chair, that would have been an agenda item for tonight. Had we achieved the regional objective of having a report or decision directed to us, as well as the open house. And then the pilot would have been initiated shortly thereafter.
So in essence, the pilot project is stalled another 6 months minimum. It's good, 2.5 years later, all right.
Thank you. Along those lines, there was a public house consultation on the left-hand turn lane last week, through you, Mr. Chair. And those results is going to be part of a feedback. Is that what I'm understanding?
Mr. Simonauskas?
Certainly through Mr. Chair, that's correct. I would like to bring back a report for information that outlines the results of that open house as well as the region's position from their report.
Thank you. There is on page 3 of this, right at the top, traffic congestion and reduced commute times in Aurora. Generally, the Transportation Master Plan is looking at improving other modes of traffic. Would that be part of the shuttle service that the council asked the region to do?
Through Mr. Chair, so the wording generally speaks to other modes of transportation. So once this master plan is completed, the region's then going to start a number of workshops with local municipalities as well as the public to start diving into what the specific initiatives will be under the various banners of this master plan. And that most certainly could be one of those initiatives.
Right, and is this going to our residents for any feedback, this master plan at this time, or?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it is published publicly, so the region has published it publicly. I'm not sure what their communication channels are, but it is available to the general public as well as stakeholders such as municipalities. So if community has any comments, this would be an opportunity. However, just keep in mind that there's been a number of public open houses throughout this process as well, in and around Aurora, so there have been opportunities for the public to comment on this.
From the region?
Correct.
But we're not doing any here because we do have our own advisory on this, do we not? Staff-wise, are the staff pursuing our transportation needs and relaying that to the region?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, there is a separate TAC, Transportation Advisory Committee, that our staff are involved in, and it's an ongoing dialogue with the region. The master plan was a specific initiative, but there's ongoing dialogue with regards to traffic and transportation matters. As well, there's another agenda on tonight's discussion, which is advancing our plan for 2017 to allow us to look at our situation as well.
And does that include the pilot shuttle plan that we had asked for?
It most certainly can.
It can, okay, so you'll add that. You know, because council did ask, and we did have a meeting last week, the region is well aware of it. Metrolinx is now well aware of it, so we might as well throw it in on ours if we're moving that forward. The other thing that we had talked about last week was signage and making aware of the possibility of using the industrial parkway as a bypass. Is that somewhere in here as well?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is I would say it's a little too specific for what the master plan is intended to achieve. However, we have communicated with the region through other channels. I know Councillor Maracas has also raised this point. We have requested that signage be improved. The region has responded not favorably at this point in time. However, there may be opportunities to further encourage them to improve our signage.
And I think Metrolinx said that they would do it. So somewhere along the lines, the reason I'm sort of making this to the point is that if we're relaying to our residents what we're doing and our studies are doing, sometimes it helps if you can sort of give them an idea of what you're talking about. For example, and saying these sort of initiatives are moving forward, have been put in, have been asked. And so people can get sort of an idea of what we're doing and then perhaps provide some feedback specifically on some of those initiatives that we're undertaking. And I think that rather than just sort of general sort of terms and waiting for the region, you know, I think one of the things that we took out from our meeting with Metrolinx and the region and MPP Ballard last week was communication. So those are just some of my comments, and thank you for your answers.
Mr. Simonauskas, I can understand your rationale for wanting to bring the results of the survey back at the same time that we would hear back from the region. I guess my question to you, is there any harm in getting those results quicker and maybe getting them on the council agenda next week so that we have them? I understand your rationale, but I think I'd prefer to have, we've completed our work, so why don't we get the results from our work?
by all means, that's not a problem at all. We can figure what the appropriate day is through through the CEO's office and definitely bring something forward, whether it's at council next week or general committee, we'll bring something forward.
That's great with me. Councilor Marakis? Councilor Gardner?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Simonovskis. Under financial implications on page 3, it says the region may ask the town to develop a finer grid street network and also something about boulevard jurisdiction. Could you explain what that might be and what that cost might involve?
Mr. Simonovskis?
Certainly. So the first one I'll speak to is the boulevard jurisdictions, and this is an initiative that's been discussed for probably 10 years now. The master plan has captured the intent of this initiative, which is essentially to take all of our regional corridors, which we, the local municipalities, own sidewalks, bike paths, and streetlights on. And the region would like to actually own all those assets as part of their corridor. So the next stage of discussion, so the principle of transferring those assets to the region has been established in the master plan. The next step is determining how those transfers are going to be happening, who's still going to be responsible for maintenance or snow clearing, and those discussions have yet to start. So there may be cost implications or asset sort of money transfer if they're buying our assets or vice versa. So those are the sort of undetermined potential costs. And the finer grid, which really doesn't have a big, I don't believe will have a big impact in Aurora, but the finer grid is essentially the mid-block collector roads, where the region is looking at opportunities, and the bigger issues are in Richmond Hill, Vaughan, and Markham, where they can increase north-south traffic capacity by better utilizing those mid-block collectors, which are generally owned by the local municipalities. So I don't believe we have too many opportunities in Aurora, and again, the traffic issues are different in Aurora than they are in the southern municipalities.
Thank you, and you have spoken to that before at the table. But if the region takes over the sidewalks, etc., that means we don't have to maintain them. So to me, it seems like it should be an even draw.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if I may, that hasn't been determined yet. The region may
Okay.
choose to sub it out to each of us. I mean, we will charge them for the service, but those details have yet to
Okay.
be discussed.
Thank you.
Councilor Marakis?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Simonovskis. Mr. Simonovskis, considering communication is key, and as mentioned, we reach out to the residents to hear what they have to say on certain issues. I'm just wondering, what did the region do? Do you know, if you do know, what the region did to reach out to the residents across York Region? Did they have open houses for actual residents, or did they just deal strictly with staff and the councils from each municipality?
If I can, through you, Mr. Chair, from what I've witnessed, they did have open houses for the public. They also had online media channels that were available. They also had an online survey that any public resident could log on and capture. There was information in all the local newspapers. So they did try a fair bit. And there is information in the master plan that speaks to some of their capture rates or their success in reaching out to the community. So there are some stats on that are available as well. If council is interested, I'm more than happy to determine what the Aurora specific stats are if that's of use.
Thank you. And just as a follow-up, were those open houses in each of the municipalities, or did they just have it at their central location and expect the residents to go out there?
They were throughout the region. I know of at least one in Aurora, maybe two. I know of one in Newmarket. So they moved them around, but we definitely did have at least one in Aurora.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Thompson?
Just to add quickly to that, I did have an opportunity to visit some of those open houses, and they were in Aurora. Also, during the street festival, they were very active in reaching out to those people that were traveling up and down Yonge Street, bringing them into the York Region tent, engaging them. They had the map and the information out there to get their feedback. So, certainly from my experience interacting with them, I thought they did a good job of reaching out to the various municipalities and the residents to gauge their feedback. And I think we could take some lessons on how they conducted their public campaign on this particular issue and try and incorporate some of those elements in some of the initiatives we're dealing with.
Seeing no other comments or questions, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Item number 5, I will ask for a motion. I'll ask for a mover for the staff recommendation. Councillor Marakis, Councillor Tom, Councillor Gartner. I think, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I pulled this because I don't remember seeing anything like this before. Perhaps I've missed it. This is basically authorizing an 8-year contract, 5 years, 5 years plus 2, and then an optional 1. That makes me uncomfortable, and I, through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Simonovskis. Am I correct in this is an unusually long contract?
Mr. Simonovskis?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we do have contracts of this duration, some a little longer and many shorter. I mean, most of our contracts are anywhere from 3 to 5 years. This contract, we've created a little longer duration just because of the services that we're looking for, as well as trying to stagger our contract renewal cycles. The 5-year term is not particularly unusual. What I might point out that's different than what you've seen in other contracts, and it's something that we've started doing 2 years ago on the roads water maintenance side, where we're actually retaining 2 contractors under this award. And essentially, the intent of that is to work with one or the other, ideally working, having them continuously compete for the services based on the tender information as well as their performance. So that's something that's new and that we're trying to do more of, and it creates an ongoing level of competition throughout the term of the contract.
Thank you. Follow-up. I saw that. I think that's a great idea to give us really secure coverage to have 2 different vendors. So what would happen? I mean, I still think 5 years is long. But what would happen? Is the contract going to be structured in such a way that we can terminate it?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think we have like a 1-month termination clause. If we're dissatisfied with their service and we report that dissatisfaction to them, we have, I believe it's a month to basically pull the plug. And we have done that in the past 5 years for 2 contracts, specifically on mechanical maintenance. So that is always an option, and we do exercise it when it's warranted.
Thank you. And just the last follow-up, do these contracts go through our lawyer, through legal?
Through you, Mr. Chair, and maybe Mr. Elliott might want to comment on this, but there is a very rigorous process that all of our contracts go through.
Mr. Chair, does our lawyer want to comment? Or
Just to confirm,
That's fine.
Mrs. Ario, yes, you will be taking a look at the contracts, or one of your staff members.
Yes, I will.
Okay, wonderful.
Thank you.
Councillor Kim?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Simonovskis, the 5-year total for the contract is $250,000, and on page 4 of item 5, a little table with Smith & Long and R.A. Graham, the 2 remaining bidders, it shows $104,825 for the total 5 years. Can you just extrapolate on the discrepancy, please?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Chair, and this is something that's been brought before council on a number of tenders that are unit-based, and this is another unit-based tender. In the financial implications, there is a statement there identifying our annual budget of $50,000. So typically when we do a unit rate contract, we try to estimate the volume of work we're looking for each of the specific areas. When the vendors submit their quotes for those particular unit prices, that's what the bid submission is based on. If the bid submission is over our annual budget, we will award up to our annual budget because that's what we have approval for. If our bid submission is under our annual budget, we will generally award up to our approved budget because, again, it's a unit price contract. So if we need additional services for any reason, or if there's value in doing additional services, a good example being road maintenance, where a cheaper unit rate results in a lot of additional activities for the same budget. And that's what we've done here. So we're requesting that the contract be awarded up to the budget amount based on the unit rates that are within the tender.
Sorry, I'm not following in terms of the unit rate. Can you describe what that is? And And then I'll have my next question.
Certainly. Let's just say an electrical contract, the unit rate might be circuit breaker replacement. $25, $50 per circuit breaker replacement. We'll say we need to replace 100 circuit breakers in a year, and that'll be our unit rate for that particular component. There'll be a number of components that all add up to various amounts, and that's what the tender is based on. If the total of all those components is under our budget, we still seek our budget approval amount to award, assuming that we can basically do more work for the same value.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Simonosis. So then lastly, is it fair to say that, we gave out a number of units of work, and they came back with a quote based on those units? And is it fair to say that the number of units that we put out there is for what we typically would need servicing for annually? And then, so would it be fair to say that in our projected budget, we've overestimated what the actual might probably be? Is that fair to say?
Through Mr. Chair, that's one way of saying it, but it works both ways. So everything is based on an estimate. In some cases, we come out ahead. In some cases, we don't. Okay. So it's our best guess when we're building the budgets. That's how we base it on.
Okay. No, that's understandable. It's just the 250,000 budget is 2.5 times more than what we're anticipating for annual usage. So that's fine. It's great to be safe than sorry. It just seemed excessive.
I think Doug wants to clarify that, or Ilmar wants.
So I was just going to jump in on through you, Mr. Chair. The 250 is the total that we would anticipate needing over the term of the contract, and those bid amounts, like we could use both those providers and still fit within the 250 allocation.
Oh, sorry. You know what? So it's combination of the two as opposed to. Got it. Thank you.
Seeing no other comments or questions on this item, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any contrary minded? That carries. Item number 7, Library Square Downtown Traffic Management Plan. I'll start with a motion to approve the staff a motion for the staff recommendation. Councillor Gartner, seconded by Councillor Marakis. Councillor Marakis, I think we'll let you speak first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Did you no, we both pulled it, actually. I think he saw me first. Yeah. Well, if you want to talk first, go right ahead, Councillor Thompson. I'm just noticing there's twice within this report, it mentions that incorporating the Library Square traffic plan into the current cultural precinct plan. And it's saying that that's, how we can achieve, solutions to this. I'm just wondering why then is the recommendation to have this go to be incorporated into the master transportation study instead? Through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Simonoskis.
Mr. Simonoskis?
Certainly, through Mr. Chair, I will provide a response, and if I may, Mr. Marumuna may have some additional comments. This report essentially has been a joint report with Mr. Marumuna and myself, looking at the planning implications of what's being proposed. The recommendations here are basically looking at trying to appreciate, understand, and recommend traffic management and parking solutions that are going to fit within that specific corridor for that precinct area, as well as how they're going to affect the larger area and the promenade area and the town as a whole. And I understand there's a timing issue here because the promenade or the precinct plan is proceeding and that work is going ahead. in conversations with Mr. Ramuna, we felt that if we can capture some effort through that process, and if not through his larger plan, which he plans to initiate in 2017, in either case, we need to capture it within a larger context. And maybe Mr. Ramuna has an additional comment on that as well.
Through you, Mr. Chair, not much more to add, aside from, there is an opportunity with respect to some of the other studies that we are undertaking or about to undertake to try and address the overall, traffic issues that we've heard about, within some of those studies. And I mean, it'll inform those studies when we do report back out on the traffic management plan.
Thank you. I still don't know who directed it to be go into that master transportation study. That wasn't part of the motion. The motion was asking for a feasibility study, but that's a different story. I'll wait to hear some other comments, but I mean, I'm definitely going to put an amendment forward to have it incorporated into the cultural precinct plan. With that being said, also we just finished discussing about how important it is to have communication with residents, and part of the motion was to direct staff to put this forward to the Town Park Area Resident Ratepayers Association, in addition to have a public information session, and I've never seen that happen to date. So I'm just wondering why that direction wasn't followed. Mr. CAO, I guess, through you, Mr. Chair.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So the attempt here is to touch base with council and see if this revised approach to it, given the numerous parking and traffic issues that have come up in the last 2 months, as well as the ongoing projects. This was an idea from staff to sort of get everything into a bundle and offer an opportunity to study it in this manner. But if council wants to maintain the path, then we would certainly take that direction and move forward with the public consultation.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. It's just, once again, that wasn't the motion. So to me, that wasn't what I was looking for when I put forward this motion. And I mean, I don't want to speak for the rest of the council, but I don't think that's what they were looking for when they approved the motion. In my mind, I put forward a motion to have a feasibility study, and when I think we all understand a feasibility study is to get back whether it can work or it can't work. I wasn't looking for an opinion piece. I feel we've received somewhat of an opinion piece saying that everything is fine the way it is kind of right now. That's not what I was looking for. There is a lot of information in there, and I appreciate that. I also wanted to hear from the residents. I wanted to hear their thoughts. I've gone and I've talked to a lot of them. A lot of them like the idea. So I would like to have heard their comments, heard if there is objections to it, so we can move forward and see, if we got to this point, maybe we should have it part of the transportation study after hearing from the residents. Or maybe it should go with the cultural precinct plan because they feel it needs to be within that. But, that hasn't happened. I also don't, and I appreciate that you want to bundle everything, but once again, we have another motion where the Yonge Street parking plan has been tied to it. Again, this is the second motion that the Yonge Street plan has been tied to. It was tied to the left turn restrictions the first time, and now it's somehow magically appeared again, and it's tied to this plan. And, so, I don't know, I'm a bit frustrated right now, but I'd love to hear what everyone else has to say before I put forward that amendment.
Councillor, take a breather. We'll let some other people speak around the table. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can understand staff's desire to take a holistic approach. There's a number of initiatives out there. They're trying to bundle things and trying to deal with the issues that have come up this term, especially this year, with regards to parking and so forth. And so, I can understand their desire to do that. But like Councillor Marcus, I'm a little bit challenged by what I see in front of me. And so through you to Mr. Simonauskas. Mr. Simonauskas, recommendation 3 speaks to a capital project. It's not been approved. So why does it have a capital project number?
Mr. Simonauskas.
Certainly, through you, Mr. Chair. That project is in the 2017, that project is in the 2017 capital plan. It's in our 10-year plan now. So it will be part of the debate come October with regards to the 2017 capital plan. It was proposed to be approved or put forward for approval in 2017. Essentially, what this recommendation is suggesting is that the request is for council not to consider for 2017. And you're absolutely right, it has not been approved, but it is in the plan for 17 approval.
So just in terms of the discussion around the parking plan, which is was put forward in the beginning of 2015, the request has always been for information to resolve some of the issues and questions that have come up from members of council. Myself, for example, about why we're paying $200,000, where the liability is. Those questions still are unanswered. At the last council meeting where this was brought forward, it was defeated at GC. And then there was a motion put forward to refer it to the 2017 budget to allow staff time to answer those questions. So now we're deferring it to 2018. And still, those questions have gone unanswered. It would be my preference just to strike it and reintroduce it in 2018. So I cannot support recommendation 3.
And Councillor Thompson, I will just add that as you know, at general committee meetings, we only make recommendations. We don't make motions. So there was a recommendation to defeat the motion, but it was a little bit of nuance there. Are there any other comments or questions on this item? Councillor Abel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, it seems to me that there's a lot going on. Just with the wordings, we have the Promenade Concept Plan, the Cultural Precinct Plan, or I thought it was a concept plan, but it's now a plan, the Yonge Street Parking Plan, the Metro Link. So we have several pots in the fire, and I think policymakers like ourselves in today's age need to proactively seize the initiative and work with foresight and vision towards solutions. So I think there's a risk when we work in a fragmented process that we're doing all this and it's not meeting the needs of our residents nor our community. So we're picking at parts, and we're really should be looking at a major vision before we go forward. And right now we're you can see by some of the comments that there's this piece we thought was 2017, this one 2018. We're doing studies, so I'm of the opinion that we should maybe consider looking down the road at 5 years, exactly what it is we're trying to do for our community and the residents in that area. So we have several plans going forward, and my comment is that we risk not making the best decisions that look for the long-term vision and solutions going forward.
Councillor Gartner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know how, perhaps somebody can tell me how this would work. So if we follow the motion that was put forward previously, and we take this to the public, and knowing that from the analysis that one-way streets are perhaps not the best way to go, and that the change in parking plan will only add 4 parking spaces, what if the residents say, well, but we want to do it? And we know that it perhaps, well, I'm going to trust that the staff has done some work on this, and the current thinking is that one-way streets are not the way to go. And on top of that, we may make changes and only add 4 parking spots and then cause some serious problems in the neighborhood that weren't anticipated. So I don't know, Mr. CEO, Mr. Simonovskis, so what happens if we take it to the public and they want something that we know isn't going to work, or they want something that potentially we know isn't going to work? Then what do we do? We up.
I think I'm going to not direct that to staff, only because you're asking them to respond to a hypothetical situation. And it's not, I don't think, a fair situation to put them in.
If I may add, I mean, we've had a motion. Now we have, I mean, it's not the way was expected to come, but we have a motion, we have a recommendation, we have an analysis, and we have the desire and also the motion to go out and consult with the public. So I don't know. Could you please let the CEO put his 2 cents into this?
Doug, if you feel comfortable?
Through you, Mr. Chair. And I'll cover some of the ground that's already been covered here. This was our attempt to take 5 or 6 different things that are all going on at the same time and at all different stages as well. I mean, the GO Transit issue was very recent and, quite a hot topic, but involves parking. The cultural precinct, as everyone knows, is actively underway. We're looking to come to council with some next steps on that as soon as November. The budget had a referral for the Yonge Street parking. So that was going to come up again there. The left turns is sort of some state of pending, the timing issue, as we've talked about. And this, and the original motion that this was responding to, is the Library Square. Looking at all of that, and rather than doing a single short-term thing to fix one of those 5 issues, and knowing that we already had plans for a comprehensive plan in 2018, which would perhaps undo action on all 5 of those, if potentially, when you looked at everything holistically. It was just a thought of staff that maybe this would be an attempt to, some of the things get delayed, some of the things get moved around, but if we could look at them all in the bundle and move that plan forward, then that would be advantageous from a planning perspective. We particularly thought that approach might be worth council considering when the net gain of the plan was only 4 spots, so it wasn't like we were, leaving 20 spots off the table for a year. That being said, if council wants to go ahead and get public opinion on the one aspect of the plan, we can certainly go out and do that. It's more about dealing with these things in isolation, and we were trying to get some kind of a basket around the whole process.
Thank you for the answer. But, Councillor Maracas has a point, and I think it's been made before, that when we have a council motion that's been recommended and approved by council, I think that staff has to follow through on that. And at that point, council can, and make comments that are similar to this, and then council has to decide what to do. So I do think that Councillor Maracas' motion has to be acted on. Just a question with respect to the parking study that was done, I think, in 2006. It included 40 spots from the United Church. So, and I believe the report says that it seems that we don't need any additional parking spots, that things haven't changed much since that analysis was done. But who at the table would know potentially if we would be able to use those 40 spots? And there's, I think, 16 or 17 beside that, just to the north, and that seems to me to be part of a private business. So I don't know if we ever could use those spots. They might be there, but I don't know if the public could use them other than for business purposes. So that comes to, I don't know, it's a lot of spots. So can anybody speak to that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, with regards to the United Church, though that parking, by rights, we still have access to it. There is an agreement in place with the United Church Board. There may be a challenge if and when they start construction, as that site will be a construction site. However, we are confirming our access. I know some parking lot damage did happen during the fire, but I also know that that area is still accessible. I think there was a comment around the public consultation process, and I would like to apologize, and it just may be my misinterpretation of the motion that was put forward. The first, therefore, basically was feasibility study and report back to council in September. And I obviously misinterpreted that motion, feeling that that was the first step, and then depending on where council was, we would then go out and do the open house and report back at a second time. So my apologies for that. I misinterpreted the motion, and I should have contacted Councillor Maracas to clarify that. And I I believe there's another question in there with regards to business parking. We do have some town-owned lands that are essentially dedicated to some of the businesses, both on the east and west side of Yonge Street, south of Wellington. Those will be included in the inventory that we're looking at as part of the Metrolinx response to the Catholic Church parking. However, as the councillor mentioned, they're essentially committed to businesses at this point in time, but we just want to verify that and have a complete study as part of our response to that commitment.
Thank you for the answer, and actually that comes to 61 spots. That's a lot of spots that, you know, if we can't count on using them, we can't put them in.
I'll go to councillors Tom and then Kim for the first time, and then I'll go around to the other side for a second time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm not going to repeat everything that's been said, but following on, and I can appreciate staff's interest in kind of trying to roll things together and get things moving. If we were to move forward the master transportation study to 2017, the fruit of that study won't be brought to bear until much later in the year in 2017. And I'm thinking specifically to the second line, which is that the Library Square traffic management plan is going to be rolled into that, and yet we're making decisions on the cultural precinct this October or this fall. And so we'll be making decisions based on Library Square and the cultural precinct, and then this parking concept won't come back to us for another year. So I kind of agree. I think that I appreciate the attempts to make it a bit more succinct, but I think that there's some trouble there when it comes to the logistics of it all. And I think I'd probably just prefer seeing a feasibility study on that, and then we can decide to move forward or not. I mean, I'm not convinced about the concept plan myself. I don't think that it'll work with respect to Victoria Street and Moseley in particular with one-way streets, but I'd like to see some experts weigh in on it before I make a decision. I'm speaking anecdotally. So that's my comment. I mean, number two for sure, and then I kind of echo what Councillor Thompson was saying. I was hoping we'd get some of that information with the Yonge Street parking plan this budget, because that's kind of why it was held up in the first place. I know we were going to make a decision on it, I think it was in June when it came to council, and we were able to defer it to get some more information. So those are my comments at the moment, and so I guess I won't be supporting what's on the table.
Councillor Kim?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I fully appreciate staff looking at the macro picture and working their way in, because more often than not, the macro picture, you can't really, it's not as flexible. I liken this situation to a jigsaw puzzle where some people like to put the borders together first, some people like to start from the core, and either way works, but from a municipal planning perspective, and when you have various layers like Metrolinx, the cultural precinct plan, those higher level plans are relatively immobile and inflexible. And so I can appreciate why staff wanted to present the report in this way. But again, I know, along with everyone else around the table, I am in support of continuing with the feasibility study to, based on current conditions, current variables, what would the one-way street plan look like? And, if you add a couple of variables in terms of, where the highly probable outcome of what Metrolinx plan would look like, what the other layers would look like, and then maybe put in a couple of other scenarios, I think that's what I would like to see if from the original motion. So, based on that, I can't support the report as is. But certainly, if there's an amendment, as Councillor Marcus proposes, then I'd certainly listen to that. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will definitely echo the statements that I do appreciate staff trying to break down silos. It is something that we talk about from a regular basis. But again, like everybody else around the table has said, I think it's a timing issue of what gets done before we get to this point. And I do agree with the comments made around the table that a little bit more needs to get done prior to this coming back to us. I've got Councillor Maracus next, and then Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I put forward an amendment for number 2 that it be incorporated into the cultural precinct plan.
Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Kim. Any other comments or questions to that amendment?
I guess my only comment would be if we're looking for a feasibility study, we might find that we don't want to include it in the cultural precinct plan. So why wouldn't we wait and get the feasibility study first? And if we want to then put it in whatever, then we decide we could put it into the master plan, we could put it into the cultural precinct plan. So I wouldn't be supportive of that.
I appreciate that, but I'm just thinking, well, when would the public consultation happen then? And when would that information session happen?
I agree. Mr. Simonovskis, how quickly could we move on getting a public consultation done on this?
Through you, Mr. Chair, if the request is to do it as part of the cultural precinct plan, then I would defer to Mr. Ramuno as to his scheduling. But if it's just a separate public consultation process, I would suggest.
So I was just gonna say, I mean, I would just like to see it happen as the way it was intended in the original motion. The last therefore be it resolved was that the results of the consultation be brought back to council along with the staff feasibility study for council review and approval. I think we're all comfortable with that. And that's what I would like to see, is what was originally intended for us and that we all voted on,
So from a timing standpoint, Mr. Simonovskis, do you think you could get that back to us sometime late October, early November?
Through you, Mr. Chair, you'd be looking at a 2-week notification process. You would be looking at developing material to present. We would have to do the feasibility before we have an actual open house, so we can actually have recommendations around what the impact of this proposal are, if that's the intent. So I would suggest December, frankly, to do the work. It's this, I mean, everything we do takes effort. So we can have an open house in 3 weeks if that's the intent, but we wouldn't have anything of significant value to present as far as what the impacts are in the larger community.
So, Councilor Marakis, hearing that, you did present the motion originally to us. Is that something that you feel comfortable with in terms of the timelines?
well, I mean, is it what I would like? No, but I definitely would like it to be given all the due consideration that it can be to make sure that we get all the information possible. And if that means it comes back in December, well, then that's the way it is.
I didn't ask you if you liked it. I asked you if you were comfortable. So I'll take that as a yes. So then could I then suggest a motion to refer this report until after that consultation takes place? Refer this entire report to come back.
Do you just want to receive it and then have a new report?
Or we can just receive this and ask for a new report at a later date. I'm looking around the table to help us, guide us in one direction, because I don't want us all going off in different directions.
If I still have the floor, if I may, I personally feel the same as I think Councillor Thompson and as Councillor Tom mentioned. To me, I mean, I wouldn't want to see, if it came back, to have that Yonge Street parking plan attached to it once again. I have concerns with that. And so I wouldn't want to just refer it for that reason. It's not
Yeah, well, there's 3 or 4 different things in there. Just receive it and we'll come back.
So we
And-
have an amendment on the floor.
So we do have an amendment on the floor to change master transportation study to cultural precinct plan. Are you okay to withdraw that if we're just going to be receiving?
I'll withdraw that if we receive this for information
All right.
and
So-
we move forward with the original motion.
And the seconder for that was, Councillor Kim, you're okay to withdraw that amendment at this point in time? So we will call this in 2 parts. The first is just going to be to receive, and then the second will be for everything else. Does that make sense to everyone around the table?
Through you, Mr. Chair, just a thought and a question for everyone is, are we putting the cart before the horse in that when we have a public consultation first without the feasibility study? I mean, what if the feasibility study comes out and says it's not feasible just based on its original study or based on other variables? And if we have the public consultation and everyone likes it, but then it's not feasible, and we can't do that. I'm just wondering whether it's worth having a public consultation before, or am I misunderstanding?
Staff have told me that we'd be doing the feasibility study first. All right, so I'll call that Councillor Thompson.
I just want to make a quick comment, I echo the sentiments that Councillor Abel said earlier. I always agree that we have to take the long-term approach. We need to look at this from a holistic perspective, but the challenge in front of us is that, this report is sprinkled with items that are not approved, some that we're actively engaged in, and that's what's muddying the waters. And so, to receive it is fine, or just to refer it back to staff, but there are too many ands, ifs, or buts sewn into this report.
Councillor Abel?
And I have no problem with receiving it. But number 2 speaks of the library square, and we haven't even really resolved the library square. One idea that has been put forward is underground parking. You could have 120 parking spaces there. And then put it in with a one-way and downtown core revitalization, intensification by the GO station, Metrolinx. We should be looking at a whole and down the road, something grand, and then working towards that. What do we want the best, and then work with it. So I think it's a great idea to work with one-way streets. I've seen it work in a lot of downtown cores we've seen, and it's worth investigating, and it's worth putting out there. But to go and do a feasibility study while we're doing the cultural precinct, and we haven't even begun, I hope there's some traction in moving forward with a vision of what a library square might look like if we demolish that, which we have not had the opportunity as a council. That's what I'm basically saying, is put a big plan out there and then go around to the businesses. Don't say, come and visit us. We'll go to the businesses and the residents and engage them. Say, this is what we have in mind. This is something we have, and then show them what it is that we have in mind. So I think it's a great idea, one-way streets and putting in diagonal parking. But I would like to try and work towards something that is a long-term, so that we can work on all the parts together rather than in pieces. And I think there's a risk if we do it in pieces.
So calling the question on the first clause, the report number IES 16-03 be received. All those in favor? Any contrary minded? That carries. And on the second, third, fourth, and fifth clause, all those in favor? All those opposed? That fails to carry. We are now on to item number 9, the planning application status list. I will take a motion to receive for information. Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Tom. Who'd like to speak to this one? No one wants to speak? All those, Councillor Gardner.
And I didn't get all the way through it, so I'm just going to start. I guess to begin with, and I may have asked this before, but I don't remember the answer. There's quite a few inactive, through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Muno, there's quite a few inactive files. And one is actually in bold. Number 6 is in bold, inactive. So could you just say what that really means?
Mr. Ramuno?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Chair. Number 6, inactive. Not sure why that's bold, but council did approve official plan and zoning amendment for the property just down the street. We know it's recently been, it's sold, property sold, and we've had some preliminary discussions with the new owners, so they will be coming in with a new application.
Thank you, Mr. Mino. I believe Councillor Thompson asked this one last time, number 10, about the Best Western Hotel in Don Hillock. And I see a file maintenance fee has been received. So what does that mean? Does that mean that there's still interest in putting a hotel there? They're paying a file maintenance fee.
Through you, Mr. Chair. The current owner was still interested in keeping the site plan file open, because they are looking at trying to sell the property with the site plan approval for the hotel. So there's just interest there in keeping the file active.
Thank you. Page 15, number 21. I think this is the old Sourmet Spa, and the file is closed. So what does that mean with respect to the site plan? The site plan agreement is registered. Does that mean they're going to go ahead with the proposal?
Through you, Mr. Chair. That's correct, and that's why there's new activity on the file. It's bold. The applicant has paid all his fees, agreement's registered, they've got their permits, and they advise us that they're going to be proceeding to demolition and construction, and they were telling me just as of last week, they're going to start this month.
Thank you, and I don't know where it is on the list, but while we're in that area, the old post office, what is happening with that?
Through you, Mr. Chair. It looks like they're still working on the interior renovations. So I don't know when they're ready to open or relocate and their offices into that building, but it looks like there's still activity on the interior. They do have some exterior work to do as well.
Thank you. It'd be great to see both of those properties active once again. Add to the downtown core. Thank you.
Seeing no other comments or questions, all those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Item number 10. I'll take a motion for the staff recommendation. Councillor Tom, seconded by Councillor Thompson. Councillor Gartner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a huge subject matter, and I'm glad to see it on the agenda. But I just go through my questions. Page 3, to Mr. Simonovskis. The bullet in the middle of the page requiring municipalities to develop stormwater master plans. We had a presentation on that. We've done a lot of work on that. Where are we at if the province does require us to do that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the province does require us to have a master plan in place and approved. It is, I believe, it's currently with the Lake Simcoe Conservation Authority for final review, and we are including future projects within our 10-year capital plan. So that has to proceed based on the Lake Simcoe Protection Act.
Thank you. Follow up, but we haven't approved any money, have we?
Through you, no, this will be coming to council both as part of the 10-year plan and as part of a final report presentation through staff.
Thank you very much. On page 3, the bottom bullet, the proposed Oak Ridges Moraine Conservation Plan would allow an upper tier or us to change or refine the settlement boundaries. So what exactly, through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Mino, what exactly does that mean for Aurora?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think, and this is the amendment proposed by the province through the plans, is that currently the Oak Ridges Moraine and Greenbelt Plan speaks to any changes to the boundaries could only occur at that 10-year review. So one of the recommendations from the province is that they're looking at revising that to allow any proposed changes to occur at the regional and local level during their official plan updates. So it's a recommendation from the province. What does that mean to, to Aurora? Obviously, nothing would happen, obviously, without, regional input and this council's input as to whether there is any justification to amend the, the settlement area boundary or the Oak Ridges boundary. Based on our current Oak Ridges Marine boundary, those Oak Ridges Marine core area and natural linkage area boundaries, I think are pretty solid from our standpoint. I don't think there's a need to, explore any options there. There may be other areas, but again, no one's approached me with respect to any specific changes to boundaries.
Could you provide, through you, Mr. Chair, perhaps an example of where we might change the boundaries in the settlement area on the Oak Ridges Moraine?
Through you, Mr. Chair, again, I think what that means is expanding the settlement area within the current Oak Ridges Moraine boundary that's outside of the settlement area. And, that is essentially the southwest quadrant of town. That is not within the settlement area. That has Oak Ridges Marine designations, either countryside, core area, or the natural linkage area.
Thank you. And on page 4, you talk a lot about the densities, and it could be pretty scary for us. The density from, well, it's now 50 going to 80, and for that downtown core, 150. I mean, how could we cope with that in a stable area, in a stable neighborhood? Or could we?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we made the comment. York Region is also York Regional staff has provided a similar comment to Regional Council last week. We will be, once Council adopts any comments, they will be forwarded to the region, and they will be sending consolidated regional local municipality comments down to the province. We agree, and the region agrees, that these targets aren't workable, within our context. Going from the current intensification target of 40 to 60 and the density target of 50 persons and jobs per hectare to 80, it really isn't workable. I mean, to try and implement that, the region did some analysis. You're actually looking at achieving densities of closer to 200 persons and jobs per hectare. It's just, and the problem there is most of our greenfield areas, like 2C and Aurora, and within other municipalities, are already approved and built out, so you can't achieve those densities. Our 2C is at 50 per, so you're looking at other areas. And again, there's not really a huge impact to us because we don't have any new greenfield areas, but there are other municipalities like municipalities of East Squillenbury, Vaughan, Markham. It will severely impact them. But the other concern that you raise, and we raise in a report, are the two new proposed amendments requiring 150 and 160 persons and jobs per hectare around the GO station area and the bus rapid transit way, which is essentially our Yonge Street corridor and around our GO station. I don't believe the GO station area is such a concern, but around along the Yonge Street corridor, those are significant densities, and the province is, identifies a 500-meter radius. So then you're capturing our our established neighborhoods on either side of Yonge Street.
Thank you. I'm not understanding. I agree with you, and I'm not understanding something. So this is a report that we're getting with how staff feels about some of the proposed changes. But when this goes into the region, this isn't how it's going to be worded. Is it going to be worded Aurora is opposed to, or staff is opposed to the density? These are just comments. How is it going to go into the region?
Through you, Mr. Chair, obviously the wording could be stronger. Council could make amendments, but we are suggesting, staff is raising concerns with these density targets and intensification targets, and the regional staff has used this, similar language. So, I mean, council could come up with, stronger language, but if you adopt the report as is, these comments will be forwarded to the region. They are compiling, all the local municipality comments, and they've got a matrix, and they're going to send that down to the province prior to the end of October.
Thank you. And with respect to the area around on Yonge Street and the promenade area, there is an option that we could send our comments right to the province, or a joint submission to the province. And I don't know if we want to do all of that, but certainly with respect to that area, that it would destabilize the neighborhoods. So that may be part of the motion later on. The other thing I'm not clear about is the employment lands. And I understand that you support not changing the employment land, or not converting employment lands to residential, industrial, institutional. But how does it work with office? With office, are you talking about like Prestige Business Park? Are you talking office like an accountant's office, a lawyer's office?
Through you, Mr. Chair. I think when we, if you're referring to the prime.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm on page 4 at the bottom.
4 at the bottom. Yes, so that references to the growth plan identifies, prime employment areas are really supposed to house, manufacturing, warehousing, and the focus is on office development to be along the centers and corridors. We don't really have centers and corridors in Aurora like the southern municipalities, so our primary office is really going to be directed towards our employment area, which is along the 404 corridor, and the region does agree that, we want to make it clear to the province that, in certain municipalities, office development should be allowed within those prime employment areas, in our case, along the 404 corridor, and we already have our business park in place where we're directing office development along the 404 frontage with a mixture, again, of manufacturing, warehousing, and other type of employment uses. So that's what that comment refers to.
Are we talking about offices that offices that employ a lot of people, or are we talking about small office proposals?
Through you, Mr. Chair, again, there's wording in the growth plan that speaks to directing or protecting those prime employment areas for those larger scale and more intensive uses like warehousing and manufacturing. And offices, should be directed towards corridors like the Highway 7 to the south of us.
Thank you. I think I need to speak to you about that separately.
Councillor Gardner, just to jump in, you've had the floor for 10 minutes.
Okay.
I think I'll go around the table and then we'll come back to you afterwards.
Fine.
Councillor Maracus?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just two quick comments. Personally, I think that I'd prefer us to see us put in our own submission to the province. I think there's more weight when more municipalities are sending in their submissions instead of one as a regional submission. So I definitely think that we should just send in our own submission, but also send it to the region so that they can incorporate our comments into what they do. So, under the section, through you to Mr. Ramuno. Mr. Ramuno, the section that says amendments to bring local and regional official plans into conformity with revised provincial policies should be non-appealable. Fully agree with it. I'm just wondering, maybe it would have been beneficial if we added in a statement as far as, it's a great first step, and if we would like to see them non-appealable, but once an official plan is approved, we would like to also see those changes of the Ontario Municipal Board when they do their review. So therefore, our official plans the local municipalities have the authority to uphold those official plans once they're approved by the province. I'm just wondering if maybe that statement could be thrown in there somewhere here or there.
Thank you. Councillor Tom?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be brief as well. Councillor Gardner picked up on what I was going to comment on and asked for some clarity, which is with respect to page 4 and the new density targets around major transit stations and in the Yonge Street corridor. And my angle at this, obviously, is it talks about stable neighborhoods, but this doesn't really talk about, and the comments perhaps won't reflect, that this is also the southeast heritage area of Aurora, at least on the western side of the tracks, and that's actually where most, if I'm not mistaken, most of the listed properties, the majority of the listed properties in Aurora are. I mean, we have a district, which is on the north side of Wellington, but the majority of the listed properties on the heritage resource list are actually in that neighborhood. And on one hand, we're trying to preserve the character of these neighborhoods and the architecture and everything else, and then now we're being saddled with all this intensification targets that are going to go up. And so I don't think that those two things are as compatible as they should be. And so my only comment would be that, if our comments are, or if, this motion is to endorse staff comments, I just think the language should be stronger with our opposition to that area of town. I mean, I know the problems, I can understand where they're coming from. They want more intensification near the train stations so that people can walk to the train, and I get that. But it's not a one-size-fits-all approach, because our train station just happens to be in the oldest part of our town. Our main street happens to be a huge thoroughfare for the province and the region. And so, I'm not sure if the state of the buildings on Yonge Street I'm not sure if those are designated or if they're just listed. But if there's intensification targets and those buildings aren't designated, then maybe there's a tug of war between, okay, well, we need to blow them down and put something else up. So I think that, for me, the language should be stronger. I don't know how we go about that. I don't have a wording for you, but that's just my comment.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson?
Thank you. And similar to comments by Councillor Tom, I agree that there's a bit of a mixed message within the report. If you read about the intensification, I understand the concerns that Mr. Ramuno just raised, and as well as members of council, but at the same time, within that first paragraph, it says that staff generally support increasing the intensification levels. And so, to me, there's a bit of a mixed message saying, yes, we have these concerns, but yet at the same time, we generally support increasing them. Probably not to the extreme that the province is suggesting with the 60% target, but to some degree. And so I think we need to have stronger language or some clarity around what is it that we do support, not just in general, but what do we here in Aurora want? Because at the end of the day, it's this council and future councils that will receive all those planning applications based upon these comments and have to make decisions. And so, 40 to 60% intensification is a pretty broad range, as we've heard about the numbers. I know that when it was first announced, there was, I think it was Joe Vaccaro of the Ontario Home Builders Association that said, if 60% goes through, you won't see any more single-family dwelling homes. It'll all be condominiums and townhouses and dense dwellings. And so that's a significant impact to the character of our community. And so I think if we're going to send comments forward, then we should be a little bit more specific of what we think is appropriate for Aurora. And I also agree that while it's great to provide them as a consolidated submission to the province, that we should stand on our own as well and forward our own comments to the province about this is how we see the changes working for us here in Aurora.
Thank you. Councillor Kim?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Ramuno. Regarding the employment lands, it states on your report that non-employment land uses like residential, retail, institutional would be strictly prohibited in the prime employment lands and not eligible for conversion. So what would that mean for those two lots on Mavernack and Wellington that's in the middle of potentially being converted? Would that be grandfathered, or how would those two lots be impacted?
Mr. Ramuno?
Through you, Mr. Chair, with respect to the employment protection policies at the provincial and regional level, you can only convert or remove employment lands to another use like retail or residential through a regional and local official plan review. And the region's in the middle of their review, and they've already considered those two blocks as part of the request that we received last year. So they would be considered, they're being considered as part of the regional review that they're currently conducting, considering those lands to be removed from employment uses to a residential use. And then this council would then have to deal with that application. So it wouldn't be impacted by this wording, by the proposed amendment, because again, any conversion has to go through both the regional and local official plan review.
So through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Bruno, so if both levels of, at the region and here, we approve that conversion, the higher provincial guidelines would not impede that from moving forward then?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct. The provincial policy states you can convert lands provided they're considered as part of a regional and local official plan update.
Okay, thank you. And, it's unfortunate when I was reading this that, there's been a lot of OMB cases since 2006, and it's a shame that all the money that's been put into by municipalities and other stakeholders to defend their cases or win their cases could be potentially be changed by these aggressive intensity targets. Another perhaps recommendation that we could put forward is, it's the report states that the province get to map natural heritage systems outside the Greenbelt, and perhaps we might put a recommendation that it should be the municipalities themselves who are more familiar with their ecosystem be able to identify those natural heritage links or natural, heritage systems.
Thank you, Councillor Abel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I really think, I'm glad we're sort of talking about this because we have to really pay attention. We did have the promenade plan that was approved for growth targets and the protection of the Greenbelt, and of course this speaks to the 4 plans. And we have now seen that the character and the stability of our neighborhoods are being developed and taken to the OMB, and we thought we had a plan that was approved and we're being taken at other areas of our town to meet those intensification plans. So I'm very, very, I want to make sure we don't fall into a similar trap by okaying something here and then it'll come back at an OMB hearing saying, well, you approve that, so therefore, and et cetera, because we've already seen that happening right now. And I don't want to get specific because, but we do have a couple of hearings going on, and we have to be really careful to send a message how it applies to us. There's no blanket one. Aurora is very different than East Gwillimbury, than Georgina, as it is different than Vaughan. We are very unique. Our greenfield is exhausted. We're small. We only have one way to go, and that's in intensification. We've got a plan right down the corridor for transit, the GO. So we really have to be careful in seeing what we're saying we're okay with, because in my opinion, it's already been demonstrated once that it can come back to haunt you and be used against you for development in your stable areas, affecting the character. And now we are very clear on that. So I appreciate some of the comments about the heritage, the stable neighborhoods, what makes Aurora, why it's unique in that, and we don't want to lose that at the risk of development and growth targets that we can meet. We can meet the growth targets, but developers take it out of context and say, well, you got to intensify, so we're going to do something really drastic in this neighborhood. So I would like to make sure that that is made clear to not only the region but to the province. I don't want to just melt it in and saying you approved and having that come back and haunt us. So I think I need a bit more time. Through you, Mr. Chair, is there a time limit on this that we're asked to provide this?
To you, Mr. Chair, the provincial commenting window closes at the end of October. The regional staff will have their comments back to regional council mid-October. So we still do have some time. If council wishes, based on what I've heard, I can draft up a stronger language with respect to some of the comments I've heard, some of the suggestions I've made in the report, and present it back even in next week, and council can take another look at it, or next GC. So we do have a couple GC and council cycles before we need to send these in.
And thank you, Mr. Ramuno. And I think what's important that we understand that when we say, okay, we're intensifying, for example, we are intensifying. We've got an application before us at Industrial and Wellington that calls for 2 10-story buildings. We've got some other big ones moving. We have in the promenade plan that says at some of the shoulder areas on Yonge Street, if those commercial developments, and they're just commercial retail, we could see 6 stories with mixed use. So we have, and we can meet all those targets. And I think if we commit to that, then we shouldn't have to be defending what a developer sees as an opportunity for him to affect our stable neighborhoods. And I'm repeating myself, but I thank you very much, Mr. Muno, but that is exactly what I would like to see.
I've got a couple speakers, but I'm leaning in that direction. If there are any other comments, we've gone around the table once, but if there's any other comments that people really want, as we refer to staff, I think it makes sense to give one more go around if that's the direction we're going. I have got Councillor Gartner and then Councillor Maracus who'd like to speak, and Councillor Tom. I am cognizant of time as well. So if we can keep our comments to the point of different wording and different things we'd like to see in revised comments, I think that would be the most productive use of our time at this point. Councillor Gartner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Following on Councillor Abel's comments, for example, with respect to the old Canadian Tire that's basically at Henderson and Yonge, I'm assuming that that's employment land at the moment. It's not? What would that be, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's commercial. It's not employment land. So the promenade actually, or promenade secondary plan, identifies that as a promenade focus area, which would permit heights up, 5+2 up to 7 stories. So our official plan doesn't have densities, but we do have that height cap of 5+2 in that area. So the concern we raised about the increased density of 150 to 160 along the transitway is that could have an impact on what that build form could look like along Yonge Street if if we're forced to meet those targets. The increased targets being the 160.
So it could be, thank you, it could be commercial on the bottom and 5 or 6 stories. And it's a little premature, but I don't believe that that's what Canadian Tire is, or it's not, maybe not Canadian Tire anymore. That's not what they're expressing they want to do for the moment. But maybe that's just an interim solution for them. Thank you. And last comment, the very bottom of page 5, in the comments, when you're talking about major retail being defined in the 2006 growth plan as non-employment, and you suggest that that should be kept that way. But for some reason it's not in there. Do you have any idea why?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, but the Regents made the same comment. So
Thank you, and I certainly would agree with that.
Councillor Maracus?
Thank you.
Again, with comments in mind that we're going to be referring this back to staff.
And perfect. I just want staff to hear this last comment, and I appreciate that. My last comment, yes, thank you. Yeah. So, like going through it, and while we all said, like some councillors have talked about the heritage aspect and, the feel of our town and all that, and I think we all agree with that. And Councillor Abel touched on the intensification and how we decide where we want to intensify, and we can handle that intensification and we can meet those targets. I think that's part of the whole overlying view of this whole subject when it comes down to it, whether it's the OMB, whether it's the growth plan, whatever it is the fact that you know, we have an official plan, we've developed it, we've adhered to the provincial policies, and so I think we need to let the province know on this one also is that our views as far as the intensification, whether we wanted that to move up or not, and you know, we can make those known to them with strong views, but at the end of the day, we should let them know that no matter what they do and whatever they decide to pass, that if they pass, whatever it is that they pass, that we will develop an official plan. We will adhere to what they're asking us to adhere to at the end of the day. But what we want is the authority to uphold our official plan. Because I think at the end of the day, if we're able to uphold our official plan without the fear of having appeals to the OMB, well, then I think we'll be able to get what we want when it speaks to the heritage aspect, not having intensification in those areas. Because when we develop that official plan, we'll say, that's not where we want it. We want it over here, and that's how we're going to develop that official plan. So if we have that authority to uphold that official plan, we don't have to worry about all those other issues coming up because we have the biggest one. So I would really like staff to have that, put that in there and let the province know that that's where we stand. We took a lead when it came to the OMB. I think we need to take a lead here also.
Thank you. Councillor Tom?
Thank you. I'm not going to put any further comments on the report, although I think what I was getting at more is if there's going to be intensification, we should just choose where that is and where it's best appropriate in our town. But my question is, when this comes back, or sorry, when this goes to, if you send comments to the province or the region or both, it's not going to look like this. So is it possible that when you bring your stronger comments back, that you bring back what actually will be sent so that we can have a look at it, and then if we want to make a comment stronger or whatever, or maybe it looks like this, I'm not sure. So I'm not sure if that's possible, and if you want to clarify, that's okay as well. But if not, then I'm okay with that too.
Thank you. Councillor Abel?
And not one last point, thank you, Mr. Chair, is that affordable housing has not been mentioned, and it's something that is a priority not only here but in the province. I think that's worth mentioning, that we have that in mind, and we're looking for the province to participate in meeting and addressing goals and objectives that have been outlined. So I think we should be making that clear as well.
Councillor Abel, just as an FYI, affordable housing and social housing is ultimately a federal responsibility, and I do have some movement to talk about that at the FCM meeting, but it falls mainly with the federal government as opposed to the provincial.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm just following up on the initiative that Minister Ballard has been talking when we were at the AMO. It was brought up there as well, so the province is participating.
Councillor Thompson?
I'd just like to put forward a motion to refer to staff and then to take the comments into consideration. I think Mr. Ramuno's already said that he could probably come back with a report based on what he's heard at the next GC.
Seconded by Councillor Tom to the referral only. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor of the referral, any opposed, that carries. So next up, we've got items number 13, sort of linked to item number 14. I'd like to start with item number 13, but if anybody has any comments relating to item number 14, which is the award of tender, the request for the additional information, if anybody has any comments relating to that, or if that's the direction we'd like to move in, I think ultimately I've got a motion ready for that. But from my understanding of the meeting last week, the deferral takes precedence over the amendments, so we'll deal with the deferred item first, and item 14 is really just for information purposes. So, with all of that said, is there a motion to put item number 13 on the table? Councillor Tom? Seconded by Councillor Abel. Comments or questions? Councillor Tom?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is just an extract, right? This is essentially we're receiving 13 for information. It's a council extract. It's not asking for anything. So it's just for information. The next item is what we're at.
I was wondering if I could get the clerk to clarify.
Well, just because, I mean, if you look at what we passed, it says that the partial installation be brought back for the next meeting, which is the next item, so.
I'll
yeah.
just get Madam Clerk to clarify.
Yeah, that's correct, through you, Mr. Chair. We put the extract on because the two amendments were technically voted on at the council meeting and did carry. However, we didn't vote on the main motion with the amendments. So your referral or deferral to this meeting would be going back to the motion that was presented. We put the extract on so you could see the amendments that were voted on. However, you've got the additional information now, so I'm not sure whether those amendments will be relevant. It will depend on how council wants to proceed with this matter.
And
So if I may, so Mr. Chair, thank you. So what's on the floor now is just a receipt of the council extract.
no, it's the deferred motion from council. It's everything.
Sam, do you have the, yeah, thank you.
It was this, correct. If during the discussion it seems like we're in the mood to be doing that, staff have presented, have prepared an amended motion that takes into account a partial award. So, speakers, Councillor Marakis.
Thank you. I guess I'd prefer that we put the motion on the floor for the partial award.
So we'll put that amendment, and that amendment amends it adds in the second clause, and it amends the third clause to include the remainder of the projects.
Fine.
Is there a seconder for that amendment? Councillor Abel, speaking to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just quickly, just a couple of questions through you to Mr. Simonovsky. Mr. Simonovsky, if we did wait, is there any guarantees that we would end up with a lower price?
Through you, Mr. Chair, statistically, we found that we do get lower prices.
Is there a guarantee, though?
No.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions on this item, on the amendment? Councillor Thompson.
My only comment is that if council's making a decision to proceed with some, then I think we should proceed with all, because we're making a decision to proceed with some, not based on a financial perspective, but we think there's a safety issue, and we think we need to move forward with it. And so if that's the rationale to proceed with some, then I think that's the same rationale to proceed with all three. I don't think, I can't really see how you can say this one takes precedence over another one without bringing into consideration that impact. And so if it's council's prerogative to not wait and tender, as the original motion said, but to proceed with some, I would be more in favor of doing them all.
Any other comments to the amendment? Councillor Tom?
Thanks. So the amendment that's on the floor is what's in front of us now. Okay, so I got that. Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree. That's kind of the rationale. We want to move forward with Kennedy because it's safer. Then what about the other two? I will kind of remind everyone, though, that we're talking about a pilot project, too. So it's looking at whether or not it increases safety. Well, you know, it's a pilot project to find out information as to whether this is a way forward. And so, yeah, so I agree that if we're looking at safety, then sure, but it is just a pilot project. And whether we continue it in the long term is also, it's not guaranteed at this moment in time. I forget the terms of the pilot project because it's been so long now, but yeah, so again, my preference would be if we're going to go ahead with that one, just to find a funding source and go ahead with them all. But yeah, we'll see what the rest of council has to say.
Councillor Kim?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through to Mr. Simonovskis. When we came out with the original 100,000 estimate, where did that figure come from? Was that genuinely what we thought we'd be paying if we put the tender out there in the early spring or last winter?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that pricing came from previously tendered projects for similar works, price indexed to this year.
Thank you. And to Mr. Simonovskis again, in the wintertime when there's snow and ice, I see the odd car going relatively faster than they should in the wintertime. Do speed humps help just as much? Are they just as effective in the wintertime, if, given that there would be snow and other elements on the pavement?
Through you, Mr. Chair, they are. The snow plows will plow over them, and they will still be present, so they do have the same effect in the winter as they do in the summer.
Okay. I'm of the mind that if we're going to do this, instead of dragging it out, let's do this. It's painful to think that we're paying more than we should have. But again, whatever the probabilities might be that the pricing might be lower in the spring, because there's no guarantee and safety is an issue.